our special guest, but we also have a higher special guest, and that is your boss, who is the regional administrator, Mr. Patrick Ray, the regional administrator of SBA of Region 5. And again, Region 5 covers Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin.
Yes.
That's good. Thank you both for being on the show.
Thank you.
I think the timing couldn't be any better to talk about small businesses and what's going on in Region 5, or the Midwest, and specifically in Ohio. So, Patrick, you were in Ohio, or in Cleveland, the last couple of days.
The last 2 days, that's right.
And interestingly enough, you had some conversations with some of our local bankers.
So I've had the privilege of meeting with the head of a number of local banks that cover Ohio for the last 2 days, and then previous to that, 2 weeks ago, I met with a number of Ohio bankers as well.
Okay.
To determine the state of the economy in Ohio.
Well, and that's so important because the banks are the front line of knowing what's happening, changes, trends, etc. And us as entrepreneurs, you know, we just kind of catch the end of it. You know, it's like we know cash flow is bad or we know cash flow is good, but these guys, they study that stuff. So maybe you can kind of share with our audience what's going on, what's happening, what are you hearing?
Well, there's 2 or 3 things which just on the street will almost jump out at you. One is the economy continues to grow in Ohio, but at a much slower rate than the nation. And that's been true for the last 3 years.
Okay.
Each year it's gotten a little bit better, but still not as strong as we'd like to see. The bankers are telling us that they sense that particularly in small business, that there's actually strong growth. And they're seeing in Cleveland will be really Gil's discussion, but throughout Ohio we're seeing a lot of growth in the small business arena. In the entire state, for the first time, we've seen a shift to small business, which, by the way, is employing about 52 out of every 100 new employees.
Wow.
And the number could be higher than that in some areas, as high as 75. So this is a good trend if it continues, and we hope it does.
You know, it's never been a secret that small business is the backbone of the U.S. economy. And it's always surprising to me when bankers finally wake up and say, "Oh my God, small business! We need to shift our attention to small business." Do you see that as, and maybe that's not true, but from my vantage point, that's the way I see it. But do you see that as being part of what the bankers are saying right now? Well, we should focus some of our attention, some of our loan products, some of our energy towards small businesses, whereas in the past it hasn't been that much.
Well, I think you're right on. Your perception would probably read something like this, that the bankers themselves have tended to be A, relationship directed, and B, that relationship tends to be larger businesses where they feel they can sell the full range of their services, not just credit. The small businesses of America, but the ones in the Middle West and in Cleveland, have been the ones that are growing. They will be the future big relationships. Mm-hmm. And by the way, traditionally, small businesses need those banks because small businesses' greatest hurdle is access to capital.
That's right.
And the fact that banks are beginning to really, really focus on that, it's a plus.
Yeah, access to capital and the cash flow itself, you know, just kind of keeping, you know, the slow payments, keeping the cash coming through the door one way or another.
Aging your payables is a nice way to put it, so that you have as much money coming in as you do going out.
That's right. Gil, specifically from the local side, are you seeing any changes or any maybe any enhancements of the types of small businesses? I know in the old days when I was in banking, there's a lot of hard manufacturing, plating companies, machine shops. You know, that's what, 13, 15 years ago. But has it changed now?
We've seen the change over the years. It really began about 97, 98. Prior to that, the largest segment of our loans went to the manufacturing segment of the economy. In 97, 98, that began to change. And now the majority of our loans go to the service sector. That could range from anywhere from a beauty salon to the corner bodega to a daycare center to a software company, basically companies with soft assets. And when you have soft assets like that, the banks look to our programs as a way to enhance the risk, to improve the risk. And we've had a really interesting phenomenon happen over the last year here. we've had one of the banks in town was bought by a bank from outside the area. They came in with a new model, and based on that model, they were able to deliver smaller loans, something that we really hadn't been able to do in the Cleveland district. Now with that bank here, we're able to not only serve the needs of the traditional small business borrower that's borrowing over $100,000, over $50,000, but with this bank, we're able to handle the needs of those that are borrowing less than $20,000, those that are operating out of their homes, those are just starting out and probably maintaining their job and doing their entrepreneurship on the side to see if it works, and if it takes off, they would then move that into a full-time job and business and leave their employer.
That's fantastic. I know a lot of times the smaller companies, the bank shied away from because it wasn't sexy, you know. But now what you're saying, you know, that these are going to be our future engines of the economy and of the United States, and it seems like the bankers are starting to pay attention to these.
And now we're able to meet the larger needs as well as the smaller needs here in the Cleveland market, and I think that's going to drive small business and drive job creation and drive wealth creation here.
That's promising, and I like hearing that. And I'm hoping that some of the other banks, you know, like they normally do, one jumps in and the others just start following in like herd. So I hope they all start to follow with similar products. And it seems like you guys are there to support them as well. That's good. I wanted to ask you, Pat, we only have about 30 seconds before going to the break, so maybe we can start formulating your thoughts on this. But how does Ohio look? You're the administrator over several different Midwestern states. How does Ohio fare? I mean, when you look at like Michigan, who was at some point similar to us, you know, hard assets, a lot of manufacturing concerns, etc. Then you look at some of the other states like Wisconsin and Minnesota, who I see a lot of our Fortune 500s are leaving Cleveland, going toward. How do we fare in all this?
Right now, I can say that Ohio is about in the middle and growth. The strongest is Minnesota, and the weakest is Michigan.
Okay. Minnesota. They're flashing me. I got to take a commercial break now. We're going to take that commercial break, and when we come back, I want to talk specifically why Minnesota, because they're colder than we are. So we'll be right back after this commercial break.
For your home.
Quality furniture with all the brand names.
Hey, let's take a look.
You'll be impressed with our showroom of fine dining room, bedroom, and living room furniture with just the right price for you. With over 40 years of service in the community, we are still here. Come in and see my husband and I, where you'll always be treated like family.
Bring in your monthly Adelphia cable bill and receive 10% off your next purchase.
Keeping you informed in the African-American community. It's your City News, news of the city.
I enjoy City News for the work and money section.
I like the Pulse section. It keeps me up on the entertainment happenings around town.
As a local hip-hop entrepreneur in the city of Cleveland, the combination of Swerve and Work and Money has done tremendously for my company.
Free at 1,500 locations throughout Northeast Ohio. Pick up your City News today.
I enjoy City News, and you should too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll put that out.
to Workin' Money. It's Tuesday night and we are live, maybe. We have two very special guests today. Everybody knows that this show, Workin' Money, is about entrepreneurship, and we have two very senior people from the administration of SBA, Mr. Gil Goldberg, District Director of the Cleveland District, and we have Mr. Patrick Ray, Regional Administrator for Region 5, which includes several different states that you oversee. Again, thank you for being on the show. Patrick, before the break, we were talking about Ohio as it fares to some of the other states, and you know, I think you're in a unique position that you see what's happening in these other states, and we were talking specifically about Minnesota and why our Fortune 500s have left. We used to have 24 Fortune 500s located in the greater Cleveland area. Now I think it's down to like 7 or 8, you know, and they've left, and a lot of them have gone over to Minnesota. So what do you see?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's not the weather.
Right.
It's really what's happened there is there's been a long-run economic development policy articulated by the state government and the major city governments with stability that's defined and incented, and not giving away money, incented the development of business. They are business-directed regions supported by the tax policy and the leadership of the political side of the house and the corporate side. In Ohio, you have political leadership and corporate leadership that's pulling, but a long-run sustained program is required, and it has to be extremely aggressive. And Minnesota's been aggressive.
You can't, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. When you got a state that cold, that north, you know, I mean, we're only cold, what, 6 months out of the year? You know, I mean, you got to see that it works. What about in some of those other states, in particular Minnesota, do you see where, do they use tax abatements?
They do, but it's a little bit longer picture than that. When I said long and sustained, they sustain the support of public education, K through 12.
Ah.
That is the key ingredient right now to attracting industry, is a strong K through 12 system plus higher education. Ohio's higher education is equal to any in the world. So you really have to, and so do most of my states, have to look at making sure that when someone moves in, their children can go to the local schools, graduate from those schools, and be prepared for a meaningful job on their graduation from high school.
Wow.
And that is the long haul. That's why I said a few minutes ago, it's a sustained commitment to the right kinds of things, and education is centered to that.
Unbelievable. There's a phenomena in Cleveland, and or maybe all of Ohio, or at least northeastern Ohio. It's called the brain drain. And I'm wondering if that's something that you would see in your preview from looking at it on the business side, and if you do see it in some of the other states that you're the administrator of?
We do see that, and let me suggest that the brain drain I define and we see as really the movement of the baccalaureates. Ohio is not a baccalaureate exporting state. As an example, Indiana is. This is good news for Ohio. It's not as good news for Indiana. I was just in Indiana 2 weeks ago discussing this. But you have pockets where you have a drain. You have some of the finest schools and medical research facilities in the world in this city of Cleveland. But the graduates from those tend not to always stay. But I want to add again, the brain drain at the baccalaureate is not as critical a negative factor in Ohio as it is in some of my other states.
Wow. So although that's a phenomena, it's happening in other states, but it's not as important as some of the other things that you talked about, policy at the highest level.
Yeah, it's so far you're holding pretty firm there.
That's great. Let's talk specifically about industries, specifically as it relates to, well, maybe we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to Detroit and Michigan all the time. Maybe it's Minnesota and some of the other states. Where is it if you're a small entrepreneur and you want to expand your business or start a business? What are some of the industries that make sense in Ohio or some of the other 5 states that you represent?
Well, very clearly, the 21st century is the cerebral century.
Okay.
What's going to happen in the 21st century is it's going to be intellectual capital, not just physical capital. Ohio is in as good a position as any place in the world to exercise the intellectual capital side.
Okay.
Admittedly, when you compare yourself to Michigan, by the way, the growth in Ohio is significantly better than the growth in Michigan.
Wow.
If you tie that to the automobile industry, which is very critical and we believe will be sustained and grow, you have to look not at working for one of those companies, but working with them. And this is where we believe the 21st century small business will be the e-lancers, and that the E will replace free. So instead of freelancers out doing your thing, it'll be e-lancers, and those are those service industries which cover a wide range, including medical support and others, which can work from small sites or even the home. By the way, we see it as colorblind, and we see a proliferation over the next 30 years in millionaires.
Wow.
We'll have more millionaires. They will be running firms, 3 to 40 people, and they'll be running them assisted by computer systems, but not computer geeks.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Colorblind. Expand on that a little bit.
If I am running a human resources department, but it's going to be a human resources, in other words, a personnel department, for 4 or 5 other companies, my specialty will be personnel. So 5 companies hire me. Everything, and I write their manuals, state law changes and everything else on safety on the scene. We run a counseling service. All of that becomes indifferent to the person hiring you, even if they tend to be less than objective, because they're looking at the product, and that product is colorblind.
So again, if you're e-commuting through the computer,
sure,
it's the product, your intellectual capital, what's in between your 2 ears.
That's why in many cases large corporations today have transferred their calling stations outside the United States.
I hate to say it, but it makes sense. It makes economic sense. We're going to take another 2-minute commercial break. My guests today are Mr. Patrick Ray and Gil Goldberg from the Small Business Administration. We'll be right back.
Keeping you informed in the African American community. It's your City News, news of the city.
I enjoy City News for the work and money section.
I like the Pulse section. It keeps me up on the entertainment happenings around town.
As a local hip-hop entrepreneur in the city of Cleveland, the combination of Swerve and working money has done tremendously for my company.
Free at 1,500 locations throughout Northeast Ohio. Pick up your City News today.
I enjoy City News, and you should too.
Trans-Ohio Mortgage is an honest mortgage company with hundreds of lenders bidding for your business. At Trans-Ohio, everyone is treated with respect, and we love to say yes.
I just got divorced. Can you help? I'd like to purchase my first home. Can you help?
We would like to invest in our children's future by buying rental property. Can you help?
So call Trans-Ohio to get your yes.
Bring in your monthly Adelphia cable bill and receive a free mortgage analysis. We love to say yes.
With the Red Cross to help prepare your community, you never know how many lives you might change. When we come together, we become part of something bigger than us all. Adelphia high-speed internet can take you anywhere you want to go. And with it, you also get Adelphia.net, which takes you places DSL can't, like ESPN 360 and Disney Connection. You get news, weather, sports, and music, all in streaming video. And with so much more all in one place, you might not want to go anywhere else.
Great new offer. Call Adelphia today.
Yeah, so easy, you do it.
Okay, I will.
You ready, Kathy?
Yes, God, I'm ready. Give me what you got.
Oh, yeah? Well, try this.
Welcome back to Work and Money. It's Tuesday night. My guests today are Mr. Patrick Ray and Mr. Gil Goldberg from SBA, and again, two very special guests. Gil, you know, sometimes when you're on too many times, you know, the specialness wears off. So you'll be special next time you're on. But right now we have your boss, who is Mr. Patrick Ray, Regional Administrator from Chicago, here specifically for the show, and I appreciate you coming in. And the states that you represent gives us a unique vantage point into what's happening, how I can run my company here in Cleveland as it compares to some of the other states. So again, thank you for being on our show. We've been talking about Minnesota. We talked about Michigan. What's happening in like Indiana and Wisconsin, two other states that you oversee?
Well, in Indiana, it's stable, growing. Over the last few years, we've been seeing between a 3.5 and 4.2 growth in each of those states and in the nation, except in Michigan and Ohio, where we've seen less than that. Wisconsin is just behind Minnesota in growth. Those two of my 6 states, Minnesota and Wisconsin, are the 2 growth states. Wow. Again, for the reasons I stated earlier, and we're seeing a lot of it. We're seeing pockets of economic growth, major pockets of economic growth in Ohio. So I don't want to downplay that, as we are in parts of Michigan as well.
What about Cleveland? The history of Cleveland has been industrial, supporting a lot of the activities of Detroit. You know, again, the stamping plants, the machine shops, etc. Do you see that as potentially going to be a growth area for Cleveland, or even something that's going to be stable for Cleveland in the years to come?
Actually, I do. If we believe that the major corporations will still exist in the out years, and they will. General Motors, notwithstanding whatever hiccup one might see at this point, is strong and ready to go. Ford is, Chrysler is, and so are so many others. Those companies will continue to produce. They're going to outsource. Outsourcing need not be outside the region, in fact it shouldn't be, and need not be certainly outside the country. So what they're going to do, and we've been tracking this using UIC codes, is they're going to continue to take things that they do internally now and transfer that outside. This will be our e-lancers working again. Mm-hmm. And if you take the UIC code and go all the way across, and this is a way of tracking business, you'll find out that those folks that are still supporting those major industries are heavily still in the area and should remain there. Okay. For these companies that find themselves wanting to geographically hop to get cheaper labor, so let's say they go to India, or they go to China, or they go to one of our fine South American friends. How long will that last? Right. The capital costs of building those plants in those locations will begin to really snap back at them. So we personally see that the industrial strength of the 20th century in the Middle West will be an asset in the 21st century in the Middle West.
Unbelievable. How, Gil, maybe you can answer this. You guys are a wealth of information. How can the average entrepreneur tap into the research and the data that you guys are generating on a regular basis? There's got to be a website or something that we can go to.
Go to the
instead of calling you directly at home, you know, and interrupting you.
There are a number of ways they could do that. One, they could call the district office directly on the phone, which is 216-522-4180. They could contact any of the small business development centers around the state, and we have one right here in Cleveland at the Urban League, which is referred to as the Multicultural Business Development Center at the Urban League. And then we have the website www.sba.gov, and they could go there.
Okay, that's good. Now, with the Urban League, what specifically, what is at the Urban League, and why is it different from some of the other areas of SBDCs?
We have a special initiative with the Urban League here in Cleveland, and under that initiative, we've set up a small business development center at the Urban League. It's the first one of its kind in partnership with an Urban League in any city. It's designed to reach out to the entire community, and what we're also trying to do with the Urban League is use that SBDC to help small businesses develop business plans that they could take to the bank and get an SBA guaranteed loan. But what we found is a lot of times, even with our guarantee, lenders are still reluctant to lend to these businesses, not because they don't have a good business plan. They do have a good business plan. Not because they don't have the right experience. They do have the right experience. Not because they're not willing to put in 80-hour weeks or 80-hour plus weeks. They're willing to do that. It's because they don't have enough of their own equity. A lot of times they could get 10% of their own money to start a business. For example, if you need $100,000 for a business, they could scrape together $10,000. But even with our guarantee and a good business plan, banks sometimes are reluctant to lend to them. They need additional equity. So we're working with the Urban League and we're working with other people here in the community to develop a supplemental equity pool that will assist these people with their equity requirements so that they can qualify for an SBA bank loan, make them a better borrower.
That's fantastic. So would an entrepreneur, an aspiring entrepreneur, would they start at the bank? Would they, obviously they don't go to SBA directly, but would they start at the bank or would they go straight to the SBDC, which is located in the Urban League's office?
I would say they would start at the SBDC and work with them on their business plan and then work with us as we put together this supplemental equity pool. We've done this in Youngstown and Toledo. Pat's very aware of that. It's been very successful, and we would like to do it here in the area, and I think we're, you know, a matter of months from completing that.
That's fantastic. I'll tell you, this has been a fantastic show. The information that has been conveyed has been phenomenal, and we've got to find a way to get you back into Cleveland every once in a while so you can kind of disseminate that information. And Gil, we certainly love working with you at the local offices of SBA. What's the number again if somebody's interested in getting information on SBA?
Okay, the general number is 216-522-4180, and let me give everyone my direct line, which is 216-522-4182 instead of 80.
You got the district director giving his direct line. Gentlemen, Gil and Pat, thank you again for being on the show. Thank you for coming into town to talk to our audience. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Work and Money. We will return again live next week with replays throughout the week on Adelphia, Channel 15. I'm James Crosby, publisher of City News newspaper. Good night.